If you were around during the 2010s and loved open world games with an immersive environment, assassin-like stealth, and a great story, then you might have been an Assassin's Creed fan. And today, if you still enjoy great open world games with a great single player story, then you probably aren't an Assassin's Creed fan. Or at least not as much. This is one franchise that, throughout the years, has changed its formula so much and still manages to sell millions of units and achieve newer customers while occasionally appealing to the older fans. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed series is a unique franchise to say the least, falling victim to microtransactions and corporate greed, but has still managed to keep its series alive. From the Desmond story of the first 5 games, the Rogue era with Edward, Shay, and Haytham, and then moving on to Unity and Syndicate, that's kind of where we started to see the writing on the wall and a downwards trend with the franchise, and then it shifted. We had the RPG 3, which had their own fans, back to stealth with Mirage, and then a sort of hybrid with Shadows. Yeah, it's all a little confusing, but we are going to break it all down and talk about what most people consider the absolute peak of this franchise. But what do people consider to be the peak of this franchise? Does it go as just surface level as having the best main protagonist the series has ever seen with a smooth-talking Italian and his modern counterpart that actually had a great story until Ubisoft finished it off in a random comic book? And yeah, we'll get to that later. Or is it the culmination of the best mechanics and gameplay the series has seen with AC3, Black Flag, and Unity? Or could it actually be Shadows, the hybrid of the RPG trilogy and stealth of Mirage? To start this off, let's do a little backstory and go all the way back to when Ubisoft first really kicked off their Desmond story and created one of the most charismatic and interesting protagonists of all time. This is finding out the truth of Assassin's Creed's peak era. Consumers were first introduced to the charming young Italian Ezio Auditore de Florencia. The last part just means he's from Florence, but it sounds cool when you say the full thing. And Ubisoft's first sequel to the series with Assassin's Creed 2, and then the naming kind of just went south after that. AC2 was a breath of fresh air after the first game, which the first game was already a breath of fresh air for gaming in general. Sure, the first game is really repetitive at the time now, but back then, it struck gold in the gaming landscape. So Ubisoft knew they had a unique IP with serious potential. So Ubisoft put on their big boy pants and really delivered with this game and its following sequels. And I can't remember the last time I actually said that sentence. Great feeling parkour, engaging and plot-moving cutscenes, immersive stealth for its time. The cities in all of Ezio's games, Rome especially, feels so alive in this game, with citizens and guards walking and interacting with each other. Nighttime is where the game really shines and highlighting how they recreated the city of Roma. The combat is alright. Once you get good at it, it kind of just adds up to kicking and hitting the counter button at the right time for all of these games, but it's still fun to take out a horde of guards or a Templar fort and fight your way out. Looking back now, these games have aged a bit, like Brotherhood especially in terms of being a very restrictive open world when it comes to exploration, and you can't really go and do as you please until you beat the game, which in terms of the story they are telling in these games, it makes sense. However, it is frustrating trying to seek a viewpoint or get another Romulus mission, and the entire section is blocked off until I do more of the main missions, and then go back out of the Animus and have to play as Desmond. Oh yeah, Desmond. Desmond's story is probably the best part of the modern setting for most of the time. To me, especially in Brotherhood, it can be pretty boring until the end, of course, but the story of what is happening with the Isu and how Juno is ending the world, it really kept me going. But running around Ezio's villa in the 2010s looking for power outlets really just didn't do it for me. The highlight of these games is of course playing as Ezio and living the life of an assassin in the time of the Renaissance. Recruiting people to your cause by having Ezio and random citizens just gang up on guards, falling in love with Christina, taking out high-level ranking Templars in some really fun stealth missions. This is one of the first and many reasons why people consider the Ezio games as the peak era of the franchise. This is where, for a time anyways, people knew what Assassin's Creed is. The franchise had an identity, and fans had something to latch onto, an identity and brand they found entertaining. And then, Assassin's Creed 3 came along and changed everything. Not at first, but this is the culmination of the entire Desmond story, with great dialogue and good in-game cutscenes to say the least. But the formula for what everyone really cared about had changed slightly. First, you play the first 8 hours as someone you don't know and the marketing didn't say anything about him, for which the story they wanted to tell, this idea does have some pros and some cons. Then Connor himself is nowhere near the charismatic god that Ezio is, and to top it all off, the core gameplay was a bit different. Plus, they added naval missions. We'll get to those later. This is the second era of the AC series that I want to call the Rogue era. See, after killing off Desmond, spoilers, sorry, the modern day part of the series has felt really bland ever since. So the core gameplay of being an assassin and how the past worked needed to change. And here's where I think Ubisoft took everything they knew and made one last hurrah with it, with Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. For this era of Assassin's Creed, I view Black Flag as like the brotherhood of this era's games. To me, Black Flag is the perfect culmination of what made AC3's gameplay so good, the writing from the older Ezio games to help the story out a bit, and then showing us a bit of the seeds of the future of the series with this title. What I mean by that is Black Flag has a lot to do in it, but nothing, at this point anyways, felt grindy or bloated. Ubisoft added the perfect amount of content while still retaining a cohesive story and keeping the player engaged with the assassin and pirate fantasy. This was one of the last times we saw Ubisoft craft a legit perfect game from start to finish. AC3, AC Rogue, AC4, AC Liberation all fall under this Rogue era as I call it, and to some people this is also considered the peak of Assassin's Creed. For younger fans, the Ezio games might have just been stepping stones to get to this. Now, these games of course were made later on, and technology further advancing means the quality will be better. But as we will see later on, that's not always the case. However, when determining when a franchise was at its peak, we have to look at all aspects, and for the Rogue era forward, the modern day just gets worse and worse. I don't want to talk too much about it, but Black Flag has the most engaging world ever offered, and they perfected the naval missions in AC3 to make this pirate gameplay so good. But then its modern day is the most boring gameplay I have ever experienced, and to me that really hurts this era, especially in storytelling. The next era I don't think hardly anyone thinks is a part of AC's peak era, but it does hold a game that quite a few fans nowadays deem as one of the best games the series has ever made. After its launch, of course. Assassin's Creed Unity is a fantastic game. After the fact. Yes, everyone knows the launch was rough, but we are looking at these games with the gift of hindsight for a reason, because we want to determine what is considered peak Assassin's Creed. And if y'all want me to be honest, and if we were discussing one game that perfectly encapsulates the assassin fantasy with a great story, the best parkour, and some of the best gameplay the series has to offer, it's undoubtedly Unity or Black Flag to me. Yes, Brotherhood is right there, it is close behind, but Unity is a really good Assassin's Creed game. I honestly believe it would be in most people's number one had the launch gone just a bit better. And the modern day, of course, was done just a bit better. All in all, though, we can't just look at one game. No matter how amazing that game is, we are looking at what's considered an era. And sadly, Unity is stuck with the game that is just a big old fat doozy to me. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Yay! All jokes aside about this game, it was the first game where I was old enough to have my own money and a job and go out and buy on my own, with my money. So it was also the first game that started me reading over reviews before I ever buy a game again. Because God, this game to me, at the time, was not it. Now, yes, playing it 7 years later for this video actually didn't help its case that much, especially right after playing a very polished Unity. I mean, this game was a struggle to get to, and I don't want to talk about it too much. The parkour is useless, as you already know, and I don't really like either the two main characters, and the only part I genuinely had fun is racing to the end of the game so I could play the Jack the Ripper DLC. The new mechanics are cool, like with the fear system and all that, but the modern day also isn't worth talking about either. So now, we can consider this we are at the end of the traditional AC games. For now. It's time for the RPG 3. Ubisoft's Pride and Joy trilogy, AC Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. Alright, this is where it's time to get to the meat of this discussion. What is Assassin's Creed? Well, before these three games, it meant great feeling stealth, an immersive story, the feeling of an assassin fantasy, alive and vibrant open worlds that completely encapsulate the time period and setting we are in, and a story of morality and the cost of freedom. So, what did these three games do? Well, as far as great open worlds that are immersive and have a great time period and setting, these games really deliver. The combat mechanics can be enjoyable. The story, I think, does get worse with each entry, but Origins had me on the edge of my seat for most of the time, and they immerse you in that world that they have created. Egypt is amazing, but these are RPG games. Like The Witcher 3 Lite or something. They aren't Assassin's Creed games, as far as what we've seen so far at least. And, they aren't also the best action RPG games ever made either, but they have their fans and they have their moments. But this is when the brand or the identity of Assassin's Creed started to lose its way. What is the biggest problem with this era? Well, to me, the RPG 3 caused the question that we are trying to answer today. What is Assassin's Creed's peak era? Well, to me, here's the truth. The peak of Assassin's Creed is whatever you want it to be. If you're a fan of this franchise, it's not the same series anymore. It's not necessarily a shadow of its former self, but it is trying to appeal to too many people at once now. Mirage was made for the fans of a certain peak era, while Shadows was in a hybrid for those who really enjoyed the stealth of AC games, but can also appeal to the newer RPG fans. Shadows is the ultimate showcase of Ubisoft not really understanding its own franchise, I think, because that concept for this series, a peak era concept, crazy I know, doesn't exist. Think about it. Series change. Look at Zelda now with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And as a series or franchise, you can go back to your roots, but trying to find one time period, one era of games that completely encapsulated what Assassin's Creed means or what deems a perfect Assassin's Creed game, that's impossible. Because Assassin's Creed is no longer the series we thought it to be. You can't say Ezio is peak Assassin's Creed when we haven't seen games like that in over a decade. Ezio games aren't a thing anymore, and what most people think of Assassin's Creed games now, especially the newer generation, they either think of this, or this, or this. Times change. Newer fans come in while the old ones leave. Sure, a lot of us still go back and play the older games, like I have been doing this year, especially for this video. But Assassin's Creed in 2020 is a completely different brand than in 2010. The truth of Assassin's Creed peak era is that the peak of Assassin's Creed is whatever you want it to be. When Ubisoft decides to deliver a game that fans can love and appreciate together, maybe we will see a revamp in the golden age, as some might say. But with microtransactions and corporate greed just flooding the gaming space every day, and Ubisoft being like the poster child of it, maybe the peak era of any series is just behind us. That idea is gone. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you agreed, awesome. If you didn't, let me know. Let me know your favorite AC games or which one was your favorite. Don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe. I will see you all in the next one. Peace.